Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. The Trump administration has been making some waves lately.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on.
Yeah, so much to unpack. We're talking about buyouts for federal workers, a pause on federal funding, and even restrictions on gender care for young people.
Been a busy few weeks for sure.
It really has. And I think a lot of people are wondering, what's the connection here? Are these just isolated incidents, or is there a larger strategy at play? What do you think?
Well, it's definitely interesting to see all these actions happening in such a short time frame, right? And to your
Yeah.
point, there are some potential connections we could explore, especially when we think about the potential impact on the size and scope of the federal government.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, let's
Yeah.
start with the buyouts offered to federal employees. It's
Yeah,
not every day you see an administration basically saying, hey, if you don't want to come back to the office, we'll pay you to leave.
it's pretty unusual, and the scale of this is pretty big.
Yeah.
Millions of federal employees got this email offering them roughly 8 months' salary if they agreed to resign by February 6th.
Yeah. Wow, February 6th. That's a pretty tight deadline.
It is. And the administration's estimating that maybe up to 10% of federal employees might take them up on the offer.
10%. So we could be talking about, what, almost 200,000 people?
Yeah, potentially a lot of empty desks.
That's a lot of people. And, there's been talk about potential cost savings. I think I read somewhere it could be upwards of $100 billion.
That's what they're projecting. But you have to wonder about the potential downsides too, right?
Yeah, like what?
Well, couldn't this lead to a shortage of experienced workers in the government? There's a lot of institutional knowledge that could walk out the door.
It's definitely a gamble.
For sure it is.
Huh.
But the administration's arguing that these buyouts are all part of a bigger plan.
Like what?
Well, they say it's about making government more streamlined, cutting costs and maybe even reshaping the federal workforce.
It kind of reminds me of what Elon Musk did when he took over Twitter, right?
Oh, you mean X?
Yeah, X. Offering those buyouts with a super short deadline and then leaving everyone who stayed kind of wondering what was next.
Yeah, I see the parallel. And it's funny you mentioned Musk, because remember Trump talked about that Department of Government Efficiency during his campaign.
Oh, yeah. Doge wasn't Musk supposed to be involved in that.
Exactly. He was tapped to lead it along with Vivek Ramaswamy.
I remember that. Whatever happened to that whole Doge thing?
It's hard to say. It seems like it kind of fizzled out.
Oh.
Ramaswamy's moved on to other things. But the idea was to get people from the private sector, to come in and see where the government could be run more efficiently.
So is this buyout offer like a page right out of the Doge playbook? You think that's what's going on here? Trying to shrink the government and cut spending?
Maybe, but the way they rolled out these buyouts is a little strange, don't you think?
What do you mean?
Well, that whole thing about employees having to reply with resign in the subject line by a certain date,
Yeah.
it felt a little rushed, a little abrupt. Some people are even saying it's a way to get rid of certain employees.
Like people who don't agree with the administration.
That's what some critics are saying.
So is this about making things more efficient, or is it more political?
Honestly, it's probably a little of both.
I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. This move could really change how the federal government works and who's working there.
Definitely a lot to keep an eye on.
For sure.
It's like they're not messing around.
Right. And it didn't stop there.
No. Then we got that memo about freezing federal grants, loans, all that stuff.
And that was a big one. It really threw everyone for a loop.
I bet billions of dollars in funding just suddenly frozen.
Yeah, and it caused so much chaos
Yeah.
that a district judge actually had to step in.
What'd they do?
Suspended the order until the following Monday at least.
Oh, wow. So much uncertainty.
Yeah, imagine trying to run a program or, depend on that funding. It was a mess.
I remember a lot of Democrats were really worried about Social Security and Medicaid.
Yeah, of course, those programs are so important for so many people.
Any disruption to them would be huge.
For sure. People rely on those programs for healthcare, housing, all kinds of things.
So what was the reasoning behind this funding freeze? Was it just about saving money?
Well, the administration said it was,
Like a temporary thing?
yeah, they said it was temporary just to make sure the money was being spent responsibly.
Well, to prevent waste, they said?
Right, but a lot of people saw it as,
Like another attack.
kind of, yeah, especially after the buyouts. It starts to look like a pattern.
Like they're trying to shrink the government's reach, not just the number of employees.
Exactly. It's not just about cutting jobs. It's about maybe reducing what the government does overall.
So if you put the funding freeze together with the buyouts, it's like...
A 1-2 punch.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what's the end goal here?
It definitely seems like Trump wants to change the role of the federal government in a big way.
It's
Yeah.
almost like he's saying, we're not just going to make some cuts, we're going to completely restructure everything.
Yeah, and, this whole idea of limited government had been gaining traction lately.
You mean like the idea that the government should be less involved in people's lives?
Exactly, and that's what these actions seem to be pointing towards.
So we've got buyouts to shrink the workforce and a funding freeze to limit what the government can do. But then there's this other thing, the executive order on gender care for minors. It seems like a totally different issue.
It does on the surface, but I think you can see it as part of the same overall approach.
How so?
Well, it's not just about fiscal conservatism, it's also about pushing a certain social agenda.
And that executive order definitely sent a message with that language about chemical and surgical mutilation.
Yeah, it was strong language for sure, and it really got people talking.
And divided, too.
Definitely, it was a controversial move, no doubt about it.
It definitely got people fired up. Some people were praising it, saying it was about protecting kids, but others were saying it was discriminatory, harmful to transgender youth.
Yeah, you've got people on both sides of this one. It's a really sensitive issue, and this executive order just made things more intense.
So what are the arguments on each side?
Well, the people who support the order say that minors aren't mature enough to make these big decisions about medical procedures, things that could be irreversible.
Like they should wait until they're adults.
Exactly. They say gender-affirming care should be delayed until adulthood.
But the people who are against the order say that it's denying these kids the health care they need.
Right, and they say it's interfering with the parents' rights to make medical decisions for their own children.
Makes sense. They're saying it's not the government's place to step in.
Exactly. And they also point out that gender-affirming care is often a process. It's not just one thing.
So it's not just surgery.
Right. Could involve counseling, hormone therapy, and then maybe surgery in some cases.
And they're saying that denying access to these treatments could really hurt these kids.
Yeah, they're worried about the impact on their mental and physical health.
Yeah. So where does this leave us? This executive order, it feels like it's more than just a policy. It's become this huge cultural issue.
It really has. It's like a lightning rod for all these anxieties and divisions in our society.
And what about the legal side of things?
Oh, there are going to be legal challenges, for sure. A lot of people are already gearing up to fight this in court.
So we don't know if it'll actually hold up.
It's too early to say. But regardless of what happens, it shows how divided we are on this issue, transgender rights and the role of government in healthcare.
Okay, so we've got these three actions, the buyouts, the funding freeze, and now this executive order on gender care. They all seem pretty different, but you're saying they might be part of a bigger strategy.
That's what I'm thinking. It seems like there's a pattern here. A combination of fiscal conservatism, cutting back on government programs, and then focusing on these hot-button social issues.
The kind of issues that appeal to a certain part of the population.
Right. It's about mobilizing a base and pushing a certain agenda.
So it's like he's trying to change the whole relationship between the government and the people.
Yeah, it's about shrinking the government's role in a lot of ways.
This is big stuff.
It is. These are fundamental questions about what the government should be doing, how much power it should have.
What should we be paying attention to as this all plays out? What are the key takeaways for people listening?
We have to stay informed and really think critically about what kind of society we want, right? These actions could have a ripple effect on everything from healthcare to education to the balance of power.
It feels like a turning point.
It does. And we need to engage in these conversations, make our voices heard.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. We've covered a lot of ground, and it's clear that these are complex issues with no easy answers.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
No, for everyone listening, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep until next time.